Hello and welcome. This is Sewing for a Friend. So today's friend is Elena. Elena and I have been friends for more than 10 years, probably closer to 15. And she and I are both ADHD and very much on the ADHD side is stronger, but we still have those autistic or ASD sort of things that make us not strictly ADHD. Anyway, so she and I were going through Joann's a couple of days ago, and as we were walking through, looking at all the fabric and enjoying the visual and tactile experience of being in there with all those fabrics, I told her that I would be willing to make things for her because I figured out I enjoyed making things for other people more than myself. And she was like, okay. But I feel like I should pay you something. And I was like, no. You are going to be funding my habit. And my habit is sewing. I like to sew, but because of the ADHD, it's a great outlet. I can be very creative. I don't have to do the same things every time, but it does have its downsides, which is I've got about 100 patterns and fabric for at least 5 or maybe 10 garments, but I struggle with, well, what should I do next? And if I'm sewing for Elena, one, I don't have to buy the fabric or the patterns. And when I get done, I can give it to her rather than it staying in my house, because I have a tendency when I'm working on projects to get the project to a certain point, usually finish everything but the hem. I hate hemming. And then I'm like, okay, well, this isn't going to fit me. It's either too big or too small. And to have someone who is willing to take that project after I finished it, and I will hem things because I'm doing it for someone else at that point. And so I feel that motivation of this person is depending on me to finish this thing. They've paid for the fabric, they've paid for the pattern. They let me have the enjoyment and the dopamine of actually creating this thing. So I will get it finished and then I will give it to her. Hopefully, I'll finish it. Anyway, and so that's how this channel came about. Because when I say I am sewing for a friend, I actually mean, of course, that I'm sewing for myself just as much as I am for them. So what we're going to be doing for Elena for the first project is a knit dress. And she picked out this really cute Corgi print that I'll show you later. And we're going to use McCall's 7349. And we're not quite sure what size that she's going to fall into. She's kind of between sizes. So before I can cut into the Corgi fabric and before I can cut into the fabric I'm going to use for the mock-up, I will need to actually cut out the pattern. Now, one of the challenges of working with a multi-size pattern, if you've ever done it before, is that the pattern lines for the different sizes sometimes overlap in ways that you can't really cut out one size without preventing yourself from being able to use it later for one of the other sizes. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take some tracing paper, I'm going to roll it out over the pattern. I'm going to mark the first size, and I will mark all of the pattern pieces with the pattern number, the pattern piece number, and then the size that I'm using. And then I'll use that pattern or that tracing of the pattern for the first round. And I'll make the mock-up with, I think, the smaller of the sizes, because when I've made other things for myself, I've found that when I'm using knit, it always seems like it ends up being bigger than I really wanted it to be. And so to try to kind of make sure that we know before I cut into that Corgi fabric, we're going to use the some test fabrics that I had this just left over in my stash. Okay, sorry, that was a little neurodivergent pause where my brain is spinning around and I'm trying to have to think about what I was going to say next. And so if you have watched the pilot episode, you will have heard me talk about neurodiversity and unmasking, and this is an unmasked video series. So what that means is that I will not be doing any heavy duty editing. I'm gonna be using my phone for filming. And part of that reason is because with ADHD, I've gone through tons of hobbies, and so I have lots of equipment that I no longer use, and I'm really not sure how long I will be motivated to video myself and actually produce episodes for this channel. But back to where I was pausing for, and that is I haven't used this pattern before, and that's another reason I'm going to do a mock-up to make sure that it fits. Now I don't have enough of the test fabric to do the entire dress, so she wants to do E, which is the longer one with the cap sleeves. But the important part for the mock-up or the wall is to make sure that it's going to fit in the important parts, which is shoulder to hip. And I have enough, I think, of the fabric to do that. And then if it fits at the hip, then the length is not going to be an issue. We're not going to have to worry about if it's going to fit when it's longer, because it is, of course, sort of an A line there. And so it will fall away from the body. And so if it fits the hips, should be fine at the hem. Okay, so that is it for this little introductory bit, because like I said, not into heavy duty editing. And if I don't do this in one go, I will just continue to spin my wheels and do it over and over again. So that's it for this. Next, I will have some video of kind of what I do or how I get my patterns ready to cut. So be right back. I trip over my chair. Okay, so the next thing, when it comes to the patterns, I cut through the tissue paper on the patterns from the manufacturer, but what I do is I cut out and leave all of the markings on for all of the sizes. So if there's a line where like on the fold, I will go ahead and cut it out right next to that line. But for the rest of the pieces, I will leave all of the sizes available. Now, a lot of times you will have people that will recommend that you iron your pattern pieces. That never works for me. It always ends up wrinkling or shrinking, or bad things seem to happen. So what I like to do instead is I have this nice table that I can spread the patterns out on, and I lay them flat, I smooth them as much as I can, and then I put pattern weights on them. And so these are some pattern weights that I made myself. It's basically just some fat quarters that I chopped into pieces and then filled with rice. And those work really nice for having some surface area to, for the weight to kind of help you smooth out large pieces. I also sometimes will use it to just kind of push over the pattern too, to kind of help do the smoothing, and then just lay it on top of the spot that I've smoothed. When I run out of those, and I didn't want to make any more because I had done those already, I purchased some of these pattern weights. They're little, let's see if you can see that. They're like stainless steel circles that have been wrapped in ribbon. And so those are really heavy and really nice for spots where the wrinkle is particularly stubborn. And then once I ran out of those, I didn't want to buy any more pattern weights, so I just started using random things that I had. So I've got my pin cushions, or, well, they're not cushions, but pin magnets. I also have some of my Taylor's chucks. Time has passed. So, rough cuts, get used to them. As I said, this is unmasked sewing. Okay, so I showed you in the last clip about how I had spread out the tissue paper pattern, tried to smooth the wrinkles out, let it sit with some weights on it for a while. And now what I'm gonna do is I am going to trace over the first pattern piece. I got a roll of this tracing paper off Amazon. I think it's the 24 inch wide one, which is important when you're doing dresses, especially because of the width of the panels down close to the hem, especially if you're doing flared patterns. So I'm going to take my Sharpie, I'm going to go around this and do that for all of the patterns. And when I'm done with that, I will kind of show you what that looks like, and I will then be able to start cutting out the fabric. Okay, so I have traced the first pattern piece out of the pattern, and one of the things that I really enjoy about using the tracing paper rather than the actual tissue paper fabric or tissue paper pattern that comes in the envelope is, well, first of all, the tissue paper is very fragile and it's easy to accidentally tear or put a hole in it. And the tracing paper is a little bit more substantial. And so while it may take a little more effort to put a pin through it, to pin it to the fabric, it's just a little bit easier for me to work with. And I don't feel like I am damaging the pattern. Another thing that I really appreciate, and I don't think I'm the only person, neurospicy person who has issues with this when sewing with commercial patterns, is because they're multi-sized, there's all this extraneous information on the patterns themselves. So you have the lines for any of the sizes that you haven't used but are within the size range of the size that you do want to use. And so I find that information, like I said, it's extraneous, it's like visual noise to me, and it makes it more difficult for me to actually use the pattern. So I really like doing the tracing thing. Sometimes it takes a lot of extra time and effort if it is a big pattern piece, and also if there are lots of different pattern pieces that are necessary for the construction of the dress. So when I trace this out, like I said, I used a fine point Sharpie pen. And I also mark it with the pattern manufacturer, the style, what size I have cut it out for, and then how many cuts of fabric. And this one I'll need to cut 2 separate pieces of, but it's unlined, so I don't have to worry about the lining. So I will now cut this one out And I have this cool little tool, a pattern notcher that I will show you, where I mark or use to cut out these notches, as well as a hole punch, but I don't think there are actually any dots on this particular pattern piece where I need to line it up later. Okay, also I have found that having a straight edge comes in handy for marking grain lines, as well as the shorten and lengthen lines. And after you followed the curve, to draw those nice long lines for those really long seams. Okay, I think that's it. We will move on to the next thing. Oh, and I just realized as I was going back through and noting the lines that I had used, that I had intended to make the mock-up, or which is also known as a voile or a muslin, or as my husband would say, a prototype, that I actually traced out the larger of the two sizes. I had intended to do the smaller of the two sizes first, but hey, I've already committed to this one, and I was gonna have to take a guess either high or low anyway, so we'll go with a slightly larger size and see if it fits, or if I will need to go back, trace a new pattern with the smaller size. Time has passed. When I left off recording, I believe I was tracing out the pattern for the first mock-up for Elena's dress. And as I was tracing out the pattern and I was labeling each one with the pattern number and the piece number and what size it was, I started to notice this word showing up on the pieces that I hadn't noticed before. And that word was moderate knits or moderate stretch. And I started thinking about the knit that I was going to use for this. And the Corgi knit that Elena picked for this definitely fits the bill as a moderate knit. It's not super stretchy. But the mock-up fabric that I was going to use, that was leftover knit in my stash, is very, very stretchy. So I'm trying to decide what I should do, because I was going to mock up this dress, but in the leftover knit, but it's super stretchy, and so it's not going to have the same properties as the knit that I'm actually going to make the dress out of. So this leaves me with a bit of a quandary, because I don't want to use the stretch knit, the super stretchy knit, and have it as the mock-up, and then have Elena try it and it fit, but then when I make it out of the moderate stretch knit, it not fit. So there's that. I mean, I still can maybe get a good idea of whether or not the size is right, but as far as putting it on and off, it might not be as accurate. The other option is for me to use some cotton broadcloth that I have and stitch it up, but instead of finishing the dress, basically leaving it open so that I can just make sure that it does fit. But again, this is not going to give a good idea of whether or not the dress is going to be easy to get on and off, because it's going to be that cotton that has no stretch in it, and it's basically just going to see if it will fit around her. So I feel like I'm in a bit of a interesting position here, because I don't want to waste any fabric. If it were me and I was doing it for myself, I would do it on the red fabric, the stretchy fabric first, and then if it seemed to fit okay, I would go ahead and jump into the other fabric. But since this is for Elena, I want to make sure that it fits, and I want to get as accurate a mock-up as possible, because I don't want to waste her actual fabric that she wants to use. So I'm a little hesitant to just jump right in on it, because again, first time using this pattern. So here is what I need to know how to put it. So if it were for me, I would probably go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But thankfully, I can just ask Elena what her thoughts are. So instead of finishing this video with me cutting out the fabric and doing the mock-up, this is a bit of a cliffhanger. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna leave it to Elena. Elena, would you rather me go ahead and do the mock-up in the super stretchy knit, which might give a false indication of how well it's going to fit and stretch when you put it on? Would you prefer that I do the mock-up in the cotton, which will definitely give us an idea of whether or not the shape is going to fit, but will have no stretch in it, so you won't have a good idea about how easy it will be to get on and off because there are no zippers, no buttons. This is basically a pull-on style. So those are the options. Or I could go ahead and jump right in and try using the knit rather than mocking it up. Just go ahead and try it with the size pattern that I currently have. I could do that, but that makes me a little nervous, so I need to check first. Another issue with this particular pattern is because it says that it's not for super stretchy fabrics, there was a second fabric that Elena had picked out, and basically we were going to do the test run in the Corgi fabric. So I am trying to do a test run before the actual fancier, nicer fabric. And that fabric is super stretchy. So that means that even if I do the Corgi print in this current one, that's probably not going to be a good option for the peachy, shiny fabric that she had picked out. So here we go. Elena, could you please let me know in the comments? Elena's friends, mom, if any of you have thoughts on what might be the best route to take, I am taking those suggestions. So thank you very much. Not exactly how I expected this first video to go, but those are the way things go. So thanks very much, and we will see what gets decided next time. Thanks. Additional time has passed, and additional realizations have been made. When I was going back through and stringing all the video clips together to post this video, I realized that there were several things that I said I was going to do that I did not do. And I did not do them because I did not rewatch each clip before I recorded the next one. So one of the things that I said I would do is I would show you the awesome Corgi print that Elena had picked. So this is Valentina, my assistant, and Valentina is now sporting the adorable Corgi print that, this is the correct way, Corgi print that Elena had chosen. And as you can see, it stretches in a little bit in this direction and not really in this direction. So definitely would consider it a moderate stretch knit. And now I will show you the fabric that was supposed to be the second dress, which is the super stretchy fabric that's more similar to the stash fabric that I had. So this is the magnificent peach fabric that Elena chose. And you can see it's got all these awesome sparkles, but you can also see that it is stretchy in more than one direction. So I don't think it's going to be good for the McCall's 7349 because they kept going on and on about moderate stretch knits. But the stash fabric that I have is, like I said, a much more stretchy in more than one direction kind of knit. So it is going to be more similar in properties to the peach fabric than to this fabric. The other thing that I mentioned that I was going to show you but did not is this really cool pattern notching gadget. So basically what it does, you line it up with where it says on your patterns to cut the notch. And I know on the patterns they show like you cut a notch out. I mean, it's not really a notch in, it's a notch out. If you've seen commercial pattern instructions, you know what I'm talking about here. But this, instead of trying to cut a triangle addition to your pattern, or trying to mark through the pattern or whatever, you line this up with where the notches is, you notch the pattern itself, and then you are more easily able to go and mark with a pen, either one of the iron away pens or washable pens, and mark that without having to worry about your pattern being in the way. Or you can actually snip your fabric if you dare. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But anyway, there's that. Yeah, I think now this is actually the end of the video. Thanks.